that prepared this particular envelope, they knew that all the mail that comes into the mailroom is opened by a machine. They cut the top of the envelopes. So what this person did, they took small doses of black tar heroin, put it along the glued fold of the envelope, and simply sealed it with a greeting card.
Jim Deschanais is a veteran member of Pelican Bay's security squad. He has witnessed a wide range of drug smuggling attempts, some nearly impossible to detect.
Okay, we'll take that with us. The traffickers on the street, they took methamphetamine and they applied it to the paper. Every place where you see coloring, that's all thick methamphetamine. And they let that dry. And then after it dried, they put food coloring on top of the methamphetamine. So it looks like grass, a plant, the sun. And then they write a little note here like a kid would write. And it says, con mucho amor, with much love. And it addresses it to the person that was supposed to get the methamphetamine drying. We received 2 of them, just like this. You remember that commercial for Trix cereal? Trix is for kids. It was God sent for narcotic traffickers. And what they would do, they would take the small colored cereal and they would carefully access the package. They would dump out some of the kernels and they would crush them up on a table. Then once they were crushed up, you take narcotic-laden balloons with glue on them and run them around the cereal. That dries and they put this back into the package. Virtually impossible to detect. Really a clever way to get drugs in.
Treat CCPOA. With me today is Jim Deschanais. He has over 13 years experience as a correctional officer, specifically in the area of narcotic trafficking and drugs. In addition to him is Rick Newton, who is our chapter president of Pelican Bay. He has 19 years of experience as a correctional officer and has been at Pelican Bay since its inception. Jim?
Good morning. My name is Officer Deschanais. There are 5 basic methods drugs are introduced into Pelican Bay. Contact visiting, mail, legal mail, packages, and vendor books. The 2 major sources of narcotics in Pelican Bay are contact visits and packages. The packages are the most challenging and difficult for us to detect narcotics in. And the reason being is there are so many clever items that they can access to put the drugs in, and it's so difficult to detect. In front of you, I believe you have a list of some of the items that they use. And if, with your permission, I'd like to just briefly go over them and explain how they do this and why it's so difficult for us to detect this. On the top of the list is Nike Cortex shoes. They've been using athletic shoes. Oh, page 2, sorry. It's on page 2. And that's a list of known areas where they smuggle narcotics into. They've been using athletic shoes for years. What they'll do it one of 2 ways. They'll take the insole and they'll carefully access that insole, and inside the shoe there are pockets in there. That's the way the manufacturer makes them, and they'll do one of 2 things. They'll either fill them up with drugs, not necessarily balloons or anything like that, just fill it up with drugs, and they'll carefully reseal those shoes. Another way they do it, and they're doing this with the Nike Cortex shoes, the back of the heel, they access the back of the heel and they can load that up with black tar heroin. They have it professionally sewed back up and they send them in. Short of us destroying the shoes, you will not detect these. And it's like looking for a needle in a haystack. The sweatpants, they've been doing this for years. They access the hem of the sweatpants or the waistbands, and you can easily hide drugs in there. Very effective way. Bars of soap. Short of putting the bars of soap in a blender and reducing it to powder, it's another excellent method of introducing narcotics. Candy bars. They've been using this for years too. They'll take 1 Snickers bar out of a case and they'll access that bar carefully and they'll load it with narcotics. And you'd have to chop up all the bars to find this. They've used jelly beans, Skittles, This happens consistently. In fact, it was at the end of 2001, I intercepted black tar heroin disguised as a jelly bean. Nuts, that's another method that they use. Well, sir, the way we did this is if you carefully look at the jelly beans, they'll use a balloon the same color as the jelly beans. So if you look carefully, it'll have, and that's how we found it. But we had intercepted a phone conversation, and the particular lady that sent the drugs in, she sent drugs in twice. The first time it got by us, and we were trying to figure out who sent them. So we started monitoring this particular visit down in the security housing unit. This lady is trying to talk to the person, her boyfriend, to try to explain to him what to expect in his package. And she whispered, jelly beans. So naturally, we waited. The package came. When the package came, we inspected the jelly beans, and there it was, a bundle of heroin. She was an Oregon resident. I went and I wrote an affidavit for a search warrant, crossed the border, and participated in a search warrant of her residence and arrested her for narcotic trafficking both in Oregon and in California. Cookies. Cookies is another problem, especially the type of cookies like Oreos, where all they have to do, carefully access the package, take one cookie and take it apart, put black tar heroin in it, seal it back up, and unless you want to take all their food items, all their cookies apart, you will not find it. Kool-Aid. We've intercepted any number of messages where they talk about putting methamphetamines in Kool-Aid. This is easy. You'd never detect that. Cereal. We've detected a lot of cereal with drugs in it. Coffee, they use coffee. Ritz crackers. Who would have ever thought that someone could use Ritz crackers to smuggle narcotics? And in your booklet there that we furnished you, there's an example of this where somebody had accessed a box of Ritz crackers and carefully drilled out every one of the crackers and secreted marijuana in there. Envelopes. They use envelopes all the time. They'll use the seal, the folds of the envelope to carefully conceal a small amount of black tar heroin. Legal-sized writing tablets, that's always been a problem. And at the top of the tablets, you can carefully access that tablet, and if you're careful enough, you will not detect that it's been accessed, and it'll be loaded with drugs. Our goal here, sir, is not to adversely affect the inmates nor the inmates' families. We're trying to make a correctional, a safe correctional environment for correctional staff and inmates. We average approximately 100 to 200 appeals a year regarding inmate packages. And the problem is the inmates' families will buy a food item, and once it comes into Pelican Bay, the officers that are searching the packages, they'll see that it's an unallowed item, and they end up taking the item out and having to discard it. Our shelves are full of items that the inmates' families purchased that the inmate never had the benefit of receiving the food item. And
Sir, can I ask,
yes, sir.
If this is put into place, would every Nike tennis shoe that comes through be cut up then, and or sweatpants?
That would be the only way that we could be sure that they weren't putting narcotics in the shoes. You would have to literally take every shoe apart, and of course you're going to ruin the shoes. It's
Mr. Chairman, the whole point of this program would be that we would take that out of the private sending it in, and these would be available in the canteen. And the canteen would have all of the goods untainted, not knowing who would buy the goods, and that the funds that they would use to send these items in a private package would actually be available in the canteen instead.
Are they going to search all of the stuff every day that goes into the canteen?
No, because the canteen right now, we've not had canteen problems, because the canteen items that go in...
I mean, assuming which I don't necessarily accept that all of this stuff is clearly going on, then my next move would be to get a hold of a guy that works for the canteen delivery service and see what he could do with the Snickers bar, and you'd have to check everything before it goes into the canteen.
Well, at this point, we've not had problems with the canteen, Senator. I understand that. And obviously, that would be an easier place to trace back to than a return address
I thought you were
on a
trying
package.
to stop the stuff coming in. I imagine it's easy to trace back to if you find out the drug came from me to you, or you to me, then your name would be on the package, and I have the drug to trace it back to you. So, I mean...
But to prove that you actually packaged that package versus just use the return address is almost impossible.
Well, I would imagine if I was the boyfriend, you were the girlfriend, I was the husband, you were the wife, somebody was a nephew. I mean, I imagine, people aren't getting packages from John or Jane Doe.
Yeah, except, Senator, the point of the program is to try, as you've said, to try to get as many of the drugs as possible out of the institution. This is one of the major ways it comes in. There are 4 other avenues that need to be addressed, but this bill just does one.
What are the other ones?
The 5 other ways?
Yeah.
Well, sir,
Employees, anyway?
Sir?
Employees smuggling drugs?
I've been in Pelican Bay since July of '90. I have never heard of an instance where a correctional staff member at Pelican Bay...
No, I mean employee, not just...
Or any staff member, sir.
No.
Any kind of correctional staff member. I'm not aware of any correctional staff member in Pelican Bay that has been found guilty of bringing in drugs.
I'll call you back.
Senator Romero?
Yeah. Let me ask, overall, the CDC at a recent hearing testified that the problem of finding drugs or contraband in the packages sent by family members to inmates accounts for only 3% of the drugs that are found, in the prisons. So
They only found 3%, Senator, because we don't have the sophistication. And I read that too, and it was a bit confusing. They found 3% of the drugs coming in. That just simply means that we don't have all the detection services that we need to have. I mean, their drugs are rampant in the facility. If there's 5 areas, and this is one of the key areas.
That may be the case, but again, I'm still looking at it over, I'm thinking 3% is a very small percentage. I'm trying to figure out what is the benefit of having such a program where you deny anything coming in when CDC itself, and I'm confident in the resources of CDC at its point and in the future, in terms of determining and finding additional contraband.
Well, Senator, it's not denying anything coming in. It's changing the source of how it gets there. So it's an untainted product. They can still get tricks. They can still get Nike tennis shoes. They just have to go through a private vendor source coming in.
Tricks?
Yeah, cereal.
Cereal.
Oh.
Yeah. I mean, and it works out to be a better bang for the buck. I mean, obviously, if it's a private vendor going into the canteen or a private vendor in general, the tricks box doesn't have to be opened and make sure that every single one of the tricks doesn't have some kind of drug in it. I mean, it's almost impossible in the food areas to get the food there and have it still look like food.
What's the difference in price at a canteen and then food for less?
Well, I don't know if that's not apples and oranges, because...
Well, no, it is.
Well, I understand. Well, Senator, just a second.
No, if I could, Paul. It is apples and apples. Because if it's $1.50 for a Snickers at the canteen, and I can get them at Food for Less for 75 cents.
Okay, and the time and effort that it takes correctional officers to sit and look through every single package that comes in versus concentrating on another avenue.
Well, I'm talking about the cost, to the families of the
The canteen, as written into regulation, is supposed to provide products at a reasonable price.
What does it cost? Does anybody know? Guards would probably know, huh? Double.
Was that a guard?
Somebody just said double. Okay, that's all right.
I understand. I mean, I think that there's a lot that goes into the products getting there. If it's just, if every package we could be assured of was a safe package that didn't have narcotics in it of any kind or any other contraband that's not acceptable, could be assured of going into the prison, then yeah, it's probably cheaper. But for the time and effort it goes into searching every single package, because they're privately sent, creates a great deal of problems. The bill was not introduced to be a burden on the families. And I know one of the areas that was addressed was if it goes through the canteen, then you're looking at restitution funds above and beyond what they're already paying, if they're paying any restitution funds. That is not something that we would think would bog down the bill, because as far as I'm concerned...
It does.
Well, no. I'm just saying that we would be willing to take an amendment so that that doesn't bog down the bill, Senator. So that if you went to an outside vendor, there wouldn't be that restitution fund, as much as the victims like the restitution funds paid in. And if you went through the canteen instead, I think that we would be willing to take an amendment that said that the funds above and beyond going through this program did not take more money away for the restitution fund to go through the canteen. I mean, there are advantages to going to an outside vendor. The program wasn't meant to hurt families of inmates. It wasn't put in to stop vendor packages. It was put in to try and alleviate one of the major drug problems that we have.
You want to suggest that amendment, Senator, or does it make it? Sir, go ahead.
Sir, Rick Newton, Pelican Bay. I've got about 19 years in the department. I've seen a lot of violence over the years. Okay, a lot of this violence includes drug wars, one side owing the other. Okay, this is one way drugs are introduced to the institutions. We need to stop it. Okay, to search a food item and to do it without destroying the item, is essentially, to some degree, impossible. Okay. If we're going to take a zero tolerance position on drugs, okay, the canteen services has got many years of providing safe product to the inmate population. Okay, we haven't had that problem through the canteen services. They buy in bulk. When they buy coffee, they buy tons of coffee. Okay, it comes in bulk. Okay, there's no knowledge of who that coffee is going to, that specific can of coffee. Okay, that's what needs to be done here. The drugs and violence go together, especially in the prison environment. Many of these inmates were of that drug culture that brought them to prison, and they continue that drug culture in prison. This is one avenue to shut that down and stop it. Yes, there's other avenues. And respectfully addressing what the Senator was speaking to. I've got 19 years in New Folsom. Yes, there was an officer that was caught for bringing in drugs. It was officers that testified against him and put him in prison. It's wrong. And if a fellow officer's doing that, he needs to go to prison. He needs to do time because it's wrong. Are there any questions?
That's one question,
Sure.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Burton.
People in the shoe get these packages?
Yes.
They do.
Senator, everybody at Pelican Bay gets at least one package a year.
One a year?
1 to 4 a year. That's what the quarterly package.
Do you have to have some kind of, I guess, good behavior, whatever?
Yeah, unless you've abused the package privilege, you can have
How
a
about
1 to
if we
4.
use other privileges in the prison? I have no idea what the answers are, so I'm just wondering. Do you have to, be on good behavior in the prison too, or what?
Senator, we pass out packages just about every day in SHU, security housing. It's
Once a year? No, but I understand. I'm taking up too much time.
I believe the difference is the restrictive list of product that the inmates in SHU can get versus the inmates in GP. Yes, there is a difference of the list that they can achieve.
Senator, I think Senator Burton raised a good point relative to the cost, so I'm happy to take an author's amendment and work with the committee to say that it can be an outside vendor rather than the canteen, so the cost to the families doesn't go up.
Isn't over. Okay. That would be accepted without objection. Is there opposition to the bill?